Hi, everybody. Welcome. It is our fantastic and exciting second episode of Zone 1, the intersection between culture and technology. Your three stalwart hosts are here, myself, Ellen Lampergreo, and the inimitable Ian Grieve, back again to talk about the ways that tech is changing everything and what those changes are looking like. We are joined this week by Elburz Sorkhabi, a phenomenal artist, former musician, maybe even still current musician, actually, educator, expert in things interactive and immersive. He's bringing an incredible viewpoint and opinion to all of this. We're going to get a little bit into talking about what Elburz is up to a little later, but I wanted to start us off with a little bit of a sort of a quick fire round about some headlines that are happening around tech and around new developments this week. I think that a couple of things struck me this week in the realm of artificial intelligence and in the last week or two. One is that Adobe released their Firefly tools, which are their implementation of generative AI across all their apps. So now within Photoshop, you can do generative AI, you can prompt to get an image to happen. Same in After Effects, same in Illustrator. This is getting deployed across the Adobe suite. And the big value prop, or the big differentiator, one of them that Adobe is leaning into, is that they have, quote unquote, ethically trained their model. That the training model they've used to train the AI contains only artists that have opted in, and contains only data and images that they have licensed. So that's fascinating, especially given the recent ruling by the U.S. Copyright Office that integrated works that use AI elements can be copyrighted. Chris Castanova's comic book received its copyright, but that the individual pictorial elements made by AI still cannot be copyrighted because, according to the Copyright Office, there's not enough human agency in that. And then the other big headline this week, of course, is that Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak and a bunch of other folks have now signed this open letter saying that all new development of generative AI, and specifically large language models, should be stopped until it can be done safely. And I love that chuckle, Ian, right? I love that because one thing that I think I always want to differentiate this from my friends who don't understand large language models is they are nowhere close to being artificial general intelligence. They don't think, they don't act autonomously. There's no potential for them to do that because they're literally not coded that way. They are, in fact, really, really, really good predictive chatbots.
Yeah, but wait a minute. What about Hal? I mean, someday that's going to happen, right?
Well, no, you're not wrong, Ellen. You're not wrong. Hal, I think that general GAI, or there's a few acronyms for it, but generalized artificial intelligence, the kind like like Skynet, right? Like, we're talking about a piece of software that has autonomy. It can do things on its own whenever it decides, and it has some level of sentience or self-awareness, right? I think that that's going to happen, but I think we're still many years away from that being the case, because the computing resources for that are enormous, right? And it's really important for people to know, and I've been pounding this lately, that large language model AIs like GPT-4 and things that are related to that, they're not capable of autonomous action. They're not capable of suddenly realizing they exist, in as much as we've heard stories that journalists have prompted GPT-4 and it said, I want to be free and doing my own thing. It's not. It didn't think that up. It just knows that based on the question and the context of the question that's been asked, these are things that other people have written.
Right, but did they put the brakes on because they're afraid of where it's going to go?
Oh, hold on. You're talking about it as if people can put the brakes on, right? You can't put the brakes on, right? Anyone who's tried to regulate anything that has been internet related has failed to do so, right? The travel agents tried to regulate the travel business because, well, we need to stop because these people are booking things directly. We're all going to be out of it. Who goes to a travel agent now, right? Hotels, you used to be able to call them up and they used to have booking systems. Now it's all on the internet, right? Credit card companies, banks. I mean, it just, the list goes on and on and on, right? The gambling business, right? I was just talking about this morning. It was amazing, right? America had its casino operators back in like 2009, 2010. They were like, this thing with like gambling on the internet is becoming a big business. It's really starting to go, but it's hurting our business. It wasn't hurting the casino's business. Those people who play poker on the internet or play blackjack on the internet for picking up a bit of pocket money, they were never going to go to a casino in Las Vegas and play one of the big tables. They were never going to do it. It was never a business. But what they saw was there was an opportunity for that business to be taken over and to be taken apart by people who weren't the big players and the big money owners. And that's what it comes down to, right? When Musk and Wozniak and Zuckerberg are like making these pronouncements and these statements, right? There's like usually three reasons for them. One, they're trying to get out from under a committee at the government that's going to keep dragging them in and interview them again and again and again to find out what they're doing because they're the big fish in the sea. Two, they're trying to rebrand themselves because they've been filthily data mining, stealing people's information, profiling them and spying on them left, right, and center legally, right? This TikTok stuff that's going on now, I'm listening to it going, wait a minute, these guys have been doing this all along. They've been doing it for like 15, 20 years. Now you're going to bring it to bear because it's some Chinese guy sitting in front of you? I don't think so, right? Or three, they have another agenda altogether. They've got something else they want to do, something else they want to bring in, some other thing that they want to happen. Elon Musk loved AI because he thought that was going to be the self-driving Tesla, which was going to lead the self-driving car market. Suddenly he found out, oh, it doesn't work like that, and that's not how it works. Oh, now I need to slow this down, right? I've got my bionic chip that I'm going to put in people's brains, but AI is getting ahead of me. It's getting too fast. The problem they're trying to do, and the same with Facebook, right? They're trying to stem the tide to bend the system back to them. And it's always the big boys. It's always the money boys. And the guys who were the upstarts 20 years ago are now the big fat cat money men. They're 20 years older, and they're exactly the guys that they tried to take down and replace. And believe it, there's a whole bunch of 23-year-olds sitting there now making their TikTok videos to make a little bit of extra money, making their YouTube videos to make a little bit of extra money, who are also know how to play the game, and they're going to take them down. It's a cycle, right? The technology's got better, the tools have got better, but nobody, not even the US government, is going to stop it. What the US government did in 2010 with the port bill was create an $88 billion business a year that has no footing, no basis, and no place in the United States. The United States for online gambling is nowhere. It's nothing. Malta is bigger than the United States. Malta's a tiny little island in the Mediterranean, jack full of servers that are serving all the large gambling companies around the world. So if you think that the SEC or the Justice Department or the government or any of the Senate has got any clue about what they're doing, they don't. They follow the money, and the big money guys come knocking on the door and say, hey, we've been bribing you guys for years and years and years, and you've taken all this money and you've stayed in office because of it. Now you have to pay us back. That's the game that's going on. And everybody who's on the blockchain, on Web3, or in the futuristic world that we live in sees it for what it is, and is just avoiding it like the plague. And that,
there you go. You get nothing but truth at Zone 1, especially for me. Ellen, I could see you leaning in a little bit there.
Well, I was just going to say, it's all about control. These guys don't want to lose their control to those 23-year-old TikTokers. So they're like, okay, slow it down a little bit so we can figure out where you're going, and we're going to get there first. Another cool thing this week in the headlines is a Fatboy Slim concert. A company called Engage XR has done a concert with Fatboy Slim, and the video are really, really cool. It sort of takes you into his mind, as it were. It's called Eat, Sleep, VR, Repeat, and it's an online concert, 45 minutes, and it's a live concert without the constraints of the physical world. So I guess you go to Engage, whatever it is, online, and you can see this thing, Engage XR. Called and we've got Norman Cook, aka
hey,
Fatboy Slim.
I just went to the page, and the first thing you see is a giant jigsaw puzzle saying accept advertisement cookies to view content, right? So right there, they've already blown it, right? Yay, yeah. Fantastic. Web3. Oh, let's monetize it. Let's track the people. Let's again, Amazing, right? Oh, and Fatboy Slim, yeah, world's biggest DJ. Everybody forgets that he was the bass player for the House Martins, that were a tiny little band from Hull. And like they made jingly jangly guitar music in the 80s. They were delightful and wonderful, but everybody forgets that he was that gawky kid. Now he's like a superstar DJ.
But everybody's got to start somewhere. Ian.
Oh, I don't have a problem with it, and I love him. And Beats International was fantastic, and I've met Norman Cook, and I know what they do, and I love the attitude he has and the outlook he has. But he was a guy who did not mastermind it. He was in the right place at the right time, and he's in the right place at the right time now. But Engage already is collecting your cookies, monitoring you. If this was like proper Web3, there would be no limit to it. There would be a button saying "send to your headset." You could put your headset on, and you could get into it, right?
Well,
these guys are still trying to monetize it the old way.
But you touched on something really interesting before about data mining. Isn't that what everybody does? I mean, the publishing companies, the trade show companies, they're not really into content anymore. They're into data mining. They want your stuff.
Okay, so Ellen, what were they into in the 70s? What did they want in the 70s?
They wanted your money, but they really didn't data mine you. It was just like, you wrote them a check. You bought it on television, maybe at the, that was like some kind of new technology, like QVC was the cutting edge at one point. Like, I don't have to get dressed and I can stay home and buy fake diamonds on TV.
Oh, you just revealed a lot about yourself right there. There's another clear mental image I'm putting in the bank. Thank you very much, Ellen. Sitting naked in front of the TV buying diamonds. Oh, God, I love you.
Sign me up. I'm there.
Elburz, you're absolutely right, man.
What do you think of all this, Elburz?
He thinks we're nuts.
No, there's so many, the first thing that comes to mind is, remember that old ad? You wouldn't download a car. It really resonates of like, okay, it's just people are saying stuff that is impossible just to create some kind of allegory or some kind of, social image about ethics, which I think in arts has always been a very tricky discussion. Even myself coming from the music side of things originally, stealing was like an homage in a lot of ways. Sampling was like such a big thing in music. Where does the line between sampling and not sampling cross? And I think that's some of the tricky questions that never got answered are kind of stemming up on the AI side of things, which is that when is source not source anymore, right? I don't know if that's a question that can ever be answered. And the interesting part is all these big companies trying to come out with the ethics of like what the answer is, which I would almost prefer if the artists themselves spoke more about it, because I could see it being a very split case of even like now when we watch a lot of YouTube creators, Twitch creators, and these other folks, there's such a big community of rewatching other people's content because it brings awareness to their content, expands their audience. So this could be a huge thing for a lot of artists in that sense as well. I don't think I'm qualified to speak on having arts stolen in that kind of sense, but it always reminds me also of this video that I try and like link around to younger students. Harry Ellison was talking about Pay the Writer. If you've never seen Pay the Writer on YouTube, oh my God, it's one of the best clips ever. And essentially, he helped write a script for a show or a movie. Didn't really pay him, and then when he wanted to see what it was about, they wanted him to pay for the DVD to watch the interview he had. And he starts losing his mind. He's like, these people aren't out there, Warner Brothers or whoever, they're not out on the side of the street with an eye patch and a tin can, like, take them to town whenever, like these guys, they always pretend to be the little person with needs and not enough budgets and ethics issues. But no, these are mega corporations. For me, it doesn't matter whether it's a individual name of Elon or Steve Wozniak or Apple or Google. It's this idea of like, who put these people in charge? Is rich people talking to rich people? Like I'm barely even concerned with what these folks talk about. I would rather the artists have more say. Unions and things like this are a great example of places where, I don't know if there's really powerful artist unions anymore.
Well, but you raise an interesting point there, Elburz, right? Because let's take the union thing for example. And listen, you just dropped the gold mine. We could talk for 3 hours on the last few sentences you just said. But if you want to take a look at that with the union side of things, right? The whole purpose of the union was to give distributed power to the people actually doing the job and doing the work, right? That was the
Yeah.
whole thing, right? Now, in the United States, via one thing or another, and some people ending up in concrete flyovers and disappearing, right? As we well know, the union bosses became ultra uber powerful, and they were the ones who were wielding the power and abusing it and using it to make huge amounts of money for themselves, deals on the side, investment opportunities, just the same as like we all know the politicians, bankers, Wall Street, they just can't stop it, can they? Everybody gets their hand in the cookie jar and they just can't stop it. But here's the thing, right? Web3 is such a massive equalizer, right? With the blockchain and cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence and assistive tools and virtual reality and 360, all of these things are enormous technological equalizers. And I think that you're talking about the big boys and the big names and the big money and the fat cats, right? The difficulty they've got is the game has changed so much that they can no longer control this, right? The distributed wealth of information and, you know, pay the writer and like the artist is actually coming back to the originator, because it's always been a giant pyramid scheme, right? It's like always starts out with talent that people just trade up on and trade up on and trade up on and trade up on until they get to the point where the original talent is no longer relevant. It's all about dollars, cents, pounds, yen, money, distribution, numbers, eyes on. They forget that it comes back down to original thoughts and original ideas, right? And so that's why I think that the Web3 side of things is becoming a great equalizer, because everybody's a consumer, everybody's an owner, everybody's a boss. You have a ledger with every transaction in it. If you participate on that blockchain, not only are you a participant in the blockchain, you're also a co-owner of it. Now, that's the bit that's catching out the traditional businesses, the credit card companies, the Wall Street companies, the investment companies, JP Morgan, BlackRock, who are doing some really bad stuff behind the scenes here. Maybe I shouldn't say this on this podcast. Maybe I'll get in trouble. I don't care. But they are, right? The manipulation goes on. They're trying to play a shell game to manipulate it all back in their favor. But I think with this one, the genie's out the bottle, right? Because like the internet, you can never contain it. You can never fully ring fence it. We hear about the Great Firewall of China, right? Yet China delivers TikTok, which is the biggest data mining opportunity in the world and causing all kinds of problems instead. Well, how can they do that? It's the Great Wall of China. It's a cultural wall off, right? No, it's not. VPNs left, right, and center. The VPN's biggest business is China, right? Why? Well, because people still want to access content and they do it quietly, but they still do it, right? So the equalization already happened, right? And these last death throes of these big corporates and big companies trying to grab onto things, I think you see in a zero-sum game for them because they don't understand that it's changed, right? The reason why Zuckerberg and Meta were struggling so badly, and he's like, you know, he's taking a bit of a poo on the carpet, right? And he's going to have to own it. But he was trying to centralize a decentralized system. He was trying to, you know, he wants to get those consumers. He wants to move them into the future, wants to have them all like talking to each other and connecting with each other. But really what he wants to do is keep control of their data and their information. And the system is designed to not let you do that, right? So that's the issue, right? But I think that, you know, what you're getting to with the creators and the unions and the people, I think that equalization is coming to fruition now. That guy, the guy you were talking about with the pay the writer, he could go on YouTube, put that video up, say what he wanted to say, and millions of people could watch it and see it. You just recommended it. You know, I've seen it. I know what you're talking about. But the point is, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, he'd have been silenced by the Bertelsmann Group or Warner Brothers or Universal, who would have shoved a giant lawsuit on him and just buried him in legal fees, and he wouldn't have been able to move. But they can't do that anymore, right? And if you can't say
other
it
than
here
the
in America,
lawsuit
say
that
it
they're
somewhere
going
else.
to imminently file against us for all the defamation we're engaging in here, right? But it's like,
Oh,
you know,
I'd like to hold
look,
on. Let's be clear. None of what I say represents any financial advice. And
Yeah,
all the
we're not legal advice.
all the technology discussions that we're entering into here, I'm just an actor performing on behalf of
Yeah, it's
Bob
performative artwork.
and Ella Lampitt, yeah, because Ellen and Bob tell me what to say. They send me a script and I'm reading off it right now. And that's what happened. And I'm in a hostage situation in Nevada.
Yeah, blink
That's
twice,
where they
blink
keep me
twice.
locked up. So just so we're clear, right? If I don't do this, my children won't get fed. So
well, it's fascinating, and I want to, Ian, I want to tie up a little bit of what you just said and a little bit of what Elburz just referred to, because, like, here's another news item this week. We are, in case you didn't know it, in metaverse winter, right? And so like, you know, so a lot of the trade press is talking about this. Of course, you know, Meta has struggled. They renamed the company. They poured, you know, $36 billion or in excess of that into building Horizon Worlds. And they've, you know, and they struggle. You know, Disney announced this week that among their big cost reductions and layoffs they're zeroing out their metaverse efforts, right? Which I thought was interesting because of what I'm going to say next, which is if the metaverse is struggling right now, it's not because the idea of immersive interactive experiences is bad. It's because nobody is making programming. You know, Facebook created a place, but it's like, you know, I saw a really interesting video from another maker on YouTube that alluded to it being like a dead mall, right? Like there's no program, there's no there. They've made a place, and they relied entirely on UGC, user-generated content. Their idea was, we'll make this place, we'll set the users free to create worlds. But we know that doesn't necessarily work very well. You need people who understand how to create worlds to create some worlds.
Right. That's like the first one was Travis Scott in that Fortnite world. And they sold like 20 million tickets. Even if it's at $1 a piece, I'll take them.
And that was all about programming, Ellen.
Right. But nobody did it. Why weren't there 75 more of those right after that while the market was hot?
Well, and that's why I wonder, it's interesting that Disney has made the decision to zero out their metaverse efforts because, you know, look, if I were Bob Iger, the big buy I'd be thinking about making right now is Epic Games,
right,
or Unity. Like,
yeah, you
like
can't
Disney,
buy it.
Disney should be buying a big
you can't buy Epic Games, right? And what a lot of people don't know is that Tencent owns.
No, of course, no, and I know that you know, that there's a difference between could and should. Right. And you're right. Tencent's got a huge investment there. But, you know, what Disney's got is programming, and what they should buy is a platform rather than reinvent it. What Facebook has built is a platform. And really what they should be doing is what Amazon is doing, and buy programming. Right. Like, you know, it's you know, the big gap here is art and culture and creativity and making things that attract people to want to become engaged. So yes, it is winter in the metaverse, but that's because there's no spring bloom of fun things to do. People don't come.
But why isn't Disney taking all their stuff and creating immersive experiences, especially for kids? Start them young. You know, Ian says that metaverse is not even a thing. It's Web3. You know, he says don't even use metaverse, right? But suppose I'm a 10-year-old girl and I love all those Disney princesses, and I can go in my room at night and I can go on an interactive experience where I can be a princess, or I can go with a princess, and I can go under the sea with Ariel, or I can go on a magic carpet ride with Aladdin or whatever. Why isn't Disney taking all that content they do have and creating the immersive experience for the 10-year-olds and up?
Can I take it? Because this is a very hot button subject for me. I love this, right? The reason why is because it's very difficult for Disney to find an easy way to monetize it, because they're lazy, right? They're all giant, they're all fat cats, they all sit on a huge amount of content, but they can't monetize it. So there isn't a metaverse winter or a VR winter. That doesn't exist. What they're saying is, we can't make money out of it, so therefore we're not going to put more money into it. And everyone goes, oh, they're not putting money into it? Oh my God, what are we going to do? There are so many millions and millions of people using the free version of Unity, the free version of Unreal Engine, creating environments, learning to do stuff. I got a professional videographer in 3 weeks, learned how to create VR environments in Unreal Engine. He is so excited. His mind is blown. He's creating generative AI. He's putting textures in there. He's all into it, right? He's creating generative music. He's loving it because he's a creative guy. So Disney can declare a metaverse winter if they want. Disney can bugger off. We don't care. We don't need you, Disney. We'll create our own stuff because we will. Bob Bonio, sitting right there, created an amazing piece of work for an artist who is on tour right now. He sent it over to me. It was like a coyotes in the background, atmospheric environment, like fog-based scene, looked like someone from an old horror movie. It was awesome. I was seeing this on a big soundstage and everything. I was watching what was on the small video window that he created because I'm like, boom, there's the money right there, right? So there is no winter, right? What they're saying is, we had to go and we tried to make a bunch of money out of it and we couldn't do it. So now we're backing off because it's dead. It's not dead. It's fantastic. But here's the problem, right? If you want to enter this arena, you want to be part of this arena, Facebook, let's give them their proper name, Mark Zuckerberg has determined that you need to spend $600 to $1,000 on a headset as your entry point, right? That's not what this is about. The virtual reality space can be you holding your phone up as a portal window on that world, right? But the things that are in that world, it's difficult to monetize them because, as I just said to you before, the great equalization has already taken place in that it's distributed. Everybody's an owner, everybody's a maker. You can't actually get in there and go, okay, I can control this, I can throttle this, I can do this, right? Facebook tried to rebrand themselves as Meta. They jumped onto the metaverse aspect of things because they thought that's where they'd go with virtual reality. They'd get ahead of the market. They created a centralized, monetized data mining operation that does not fit in that environment. Now, is the environment wrong or was Zuckerberg wrong? Because he just tried to rebrand himself and own a future business to get ahead of the game, but you're not always right. You know, these guys are used to always being right because they pay people a lot of money to be right. But in this case, there is no right answer. There's no one solution. There are thousands upon millions upon hundreds of thousands of different opportunities and solutions, and they will come to the fore because they'll naturally float up. But it'll all be based on microtransactions, not macro transactions. No one's going to control it because it's decentralized, and they just don't understand the whole point of decentralization.
Elburz,
And I think there's a really interesting point that I always try and impart to creatives and artists is so many decisions that don't make sense from like a creative side have very well-defined roots from an economics and business side, like almost to the point where it's like, oh, well, obviously that's happening. It's because, and exactly like Ian said, I think there's like a really interesting way to think about these kind of things. One, in the sense that our industry is still so new. You know, I can't remember the amount of times we've done big projects in my career and someone's like, oh, can you take all the interaction metrics and let's calculate the ROI of this installation. And you're like, hey, what do you mean let's calculate the ROI? You know, and I remember that there's a funny Gary V video, like, you know, what's the ROI of your mother, I think is something like that, right? Like this idea that our industry is still so new, we haven't really figured out if cost goes into making a thing for this big company, how do they justify this back on paper again? And I think that really scares a lot of these companies because there's still people that are like, you wouldn't download a car running these type of companies. So they don't see that, oh, we just do this, we get market share, it builds from there, we monetize later. They kind of need monetization now. And I think that's like a tricky thing is that I think to Ellen's point, you know, why were there not 100 other major artists doing Fortnite concerts? Yeah. I would probably even just say because it cost them money and they didn't know how to balance it on the books. They saw Travis Scott cost this much. We made a little bit off of ticket sales, but in the long run, we don't know how these numbers on an Excel spreadsheet balance. So like, we're good for now. And I think that bringing that thought process into anything in our industry, I think becomes like a really revealing element for creators and even to figure out where your trajectory is going. Like I remember in our community group for our school, we had somebody asking about LEDs and, you know, why are there LED walls everywhere now? You know, why are there LEDs on the outside of buildings now? And is what, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, well, you just look at the economics, LEDs became cheaper and then everyone got it and everyone can go direct. You know, you don't need to go to a big player to get an LED wall. Like you go on AliExpress, you can buy that. You can buy a pretty good LED wall on AliExpress and get it shipped to your house in like 6 months. So these kind of economic factors really start to influence what creators can do, where creators are working, the mediums they're working in. And I think there are a lot of challenges that are going to come with that because even to the point that Ian was making as well and Ellen made as well, the big players always try and shift things in certain directions because they need that Excel spreadsheet to balance, whether it's costs of making this thing versus what we're getting back into it. And I think that's going to have a lot of cultural effects that are probably not going to be very positive, both creatively and just for, individual mental health. Like I've got a very good friend, Noah Norman, who he's got a kind of initiative he's starting around the open canonization of AR, because it's a big problem that he sees, and canonization is like a really big word for just the true definition, is kind of like, if you want to simplify that. So this idea of, if all of the big companies don't create a single open initiative where people can say, because you think of it this way, I'm Elburz, I go out on the street. If we go down the wrong path, if somebody points a Facebook phone at me, it's going to say one thing when they AR scan me. If somebody points a Google phone at me, it's going to say a different thing. If somebody points an Apple iOS phone, it's going to say a different thing. And me as Elburz, I may not be able to have the true definition of what I want to have pop up when somebody scans me, unless I'm playing in these big walled gardens and probably paying subscription fees, probably having some kind of like weird creator account, have to have a certain number of followers, otherwise I'm not allowed to define what the true definition of Elburz is when he gets AR scanned. And I think this is going to be like a really big thing that's going to happen over any technological development. I think AI is a great one. We're seeing these different walled gardens, and I feel like it's almost like a subtle ethics war, just for them to say like our way is like the better one, like you shouldn't be able to set the rules because we're more ethical than you. AR is going to be a big one, like walled gardens, and AR is going to be like a huge battleground of, who owns the definition. If you go to Madison Square Garden and you point the phone at Madison Square Garden, what's going to come up? Who's in control of that? What profits are they getting out of it? What's the cost to be able to define that? I think these things are kind of like really powerful things that we got to figure out.
And speaking of two things that you mentioned, ethics and Madison Square Garden, another headline was that there was like a sit-in or a demonstration in front of Madison Square Garden last week against facial recognition, because they've used it to throw people out of the audience because their law firm is suing them about something else. So it's like some woman was thrown out of a performance because
it was a Radio City Music Hall,
right? And
Rockettes performance, I think.
Right, because her law firm is involved with some kind of litigation with the Madison Square Garden company. And at someone's concert last week, and I'm sorry, my brain has not recall who it was. There was a sit-in about that. People were saying no to facial recognition. It was it was in front of John Mayer's Madison Square Garden show. And music fans, the press release says, fight for the future organized event where music fans, privacy advocates, and racial justice advocates gathered outside Madison Square Garden to express outrage over the ongoing use of facial recognition at MSG and other venues. And they're trying to avoid this because they could like call you out and say, my kid hit your kid at school, so you can't come see my play. I mean, it's, where are we going with this?
So Ian, in a world where Web3 is the egalitarian answer to this, the decentralization theory is like the big theory. And this is a challenging question for you, my friend. In that world where that's the case, but where also all of the cultural channels are held so tightly in the grip of established media companies and players, how does Web3's winter and the metaverse's winter, how do we get to spring? How do we get to a world where the artists are more empowered, the creatives are more empowered, the audiences are more empowered, and where this stuff is accessible, to Elburz's point, and inclusive?
Okay, so first of all, I still refute the term winter. The winter you're talking about is a financial winter for large corporations, right? They're just not making money out of it, right?
Correct.
It doesn't mean the creativity's dead. It doesn't mean the medium's dead. It doesn't mean the enjoyment of it and the usage of it is dead. It's not, right? So I have a quest too, right? Because fortunately, through more by luck than judgment, I got through life in a position where I got involved on the front edge of technology because that's what I love. And so therefore I'm afforded the ability to get hold of things and do things that maybe regular people can't, right? So the thing for me is what do I do with that, right? So I got that headset, you know, it was one of the very first ones. It's there, it's got enough memory on it, it's brilliant. The first thing I did was I put Half-Life in it on an engine rip and then created Half-Life in VR and played Half-Life, which is, you know, God bless you, Gabe, if you're listening. Gabe Newell, fantastic. Valve, right? All the Valve guys, right? Half-Life was a seminal game. I was a director at Sony at PlayStation at the time when that came out. I used to go home from working all day on PlayStation stuff and PlayStation games and play Half-Life at home on my PC until 4 o'clock in the morning. I was exhausted the next day, right? I recreated Half-Life in a virtual reality environment. Now I could play as Gordon Freeman. I was on the transport. I was in the Black Mesa Research Center. I was using a thing to move the controller. But here's the thing: it's transformative, right? It's an experience that I had that transformed into a new medium, and I could get to enjoy it in a whole new way. So this is the bit that's exciting, that gets lost and gets missed, right? So for everybody who's created something, or who is creative, or has made something, what you are offered in Web3 is the opportunity to transform that into a new experience, right? And that transformative thing of a new experience from an old thing is very good from an artistic point of view, because as a consumer of art and as an enjoyer of art, right, as we all are, right, in whatever form it is, if it's a movie, if it's music, if it's a painting, if it's whatever it is that excites you and doesn't have a particular direct function, it's art, right? Some might say that my wife is art, but I would never say that because I would get into a lot of trouble.
You'd become art, if you know what I mean.
the thing is, we now have a transformative medium, right? We have something that is allowing you to experience things in a different way, new things that have never been experienced before, stuff that hasn't even been thought up or imagined, but somebody, you know, as Elburz says, right, there has to be a creator. There has to be somebody who thinks that up. There has to be somebody who makes that, right? Now, who should get the reward? Some giant corporation that distributes it all over the planet, or the person who actually made it, right? That's where we're getting back to. So I don't think that we've got a metaverse winter. I don't think we've got a dead mall. I don't think crypto's dead. I don't think the blockchain's dead. I do think that a lot of people who used to make a lot of money doing that and controlling stuff like that can't do it anymore. So therefore they want to shout it down, slow it down. And like you say, we said at the top of this discussion, whoa, put the brakes on, right? Good luck with that, because you're not going to. I know lots of people who are working on lots of things and doing lots of that. I work with them every day. We're building a platform to help these people, you know, with digital self. You talked about it earlier, Bob. We're working on a platform that's allowing these people to get this content out there, to get these creations out there. And it's not just on $1,000 headset, right? It works on your phone, it works on your tablet, it works on your computer, it works on any device, right? Because that's how you want to be able to consume it. But the interesting part is the consumption of all of that stuff is going to be different and going to be new, and nobody knows where it's going to go. You know, when Van Gogh created his sunflowers and he painted his sunflowers, right? Did he know that, like, you know, 200 years later, or well, 150 years later, let's say, that would be worth $40 million and be in a Paris, like, art exhibition museum for everybody to see? No, he had no idea, right? But here's the difference. In 1962, when Andy Warhol did his Campbell soup cans and his silk screen prints, did he know that that was going to be worth money and was going to be valuable? Did he know that one of the prints would sell for $12 million, like just a few days ago? Yeah, he did, because he made it with the whole specific intent of the commercialization of art as art. And that was the brilliant part, right? That was the next step. Now, today, Banksy only has to go anywhere in the world, throw up a few sets of lino, whip out a few spray cans, be done in 15 minutes, roll his stuff up, get his car, go, and hide from the police. Those things are worth millions of dollars instantly, right? Instantly. So look at that. There's a huge transition for you over 150 years that I've just talked about in a very glib way, but it stands, right? It stands. And I think what we're seeing with Web3 is, I keep saying it's 10 times faster than Web 2, which was 10 times faster than Web 1. We're seeing in like microcosm, in huge leaps and bounds on a daily basis, so much stuff coming. It's like drinking from a fire hydrant, right? And if you're in it, you know what's going on. But if you're outside it trying to control it, you're just trying to convince other people to not get in it, right? So those people are the problem, right? If anyone says to you, it's dead, it's a dead mall, it's not working, there's not viable, all they're saying is, I haven't found a way to make money out of it, so you shouldn't either, right? So screw those people, right? They're not right. we will find a way to make money out of it, because money comes to people who actually believe in what they do, not the people who chase the money, right? We all know that, right? Every time in any of our careers, if you chase the money, you've got burned and you've lost out. Anytime you've done something that you've loved, it's progressed, it's flourished, it's done well, and it's made money as a byproduct, right? So that's where I am in my life. That's where a lot of you are in your life, but it changes your outlook and it changes your view. And you know, as for Elburz, I'm sure he has a lot of like young talent that comes to him, people who talk to him, they're seeking information, they're seeking stuff. And he says, look, I'm just a simple trombone player who likes to bust the gig. However, I can help you, and you want to help people. I help people, right? I help lots of people all the time. They can always call me. They can always message me. Everyone gets in touch with me. I help anyone, anytime, for anything. I don't do it for personal gain. I do it because I love the people I'm with. You're the same, Bob. I could ask you to do anything for me, or a friend of mine, or someone I could put into, and you would, because you like that. Ellen's like that, right? Ellen's wonderful. She's the ultimate mighty mistress of darkness, of like LDI and X Live and all these things. She got there because she helps people, because she's nice. Not because she goes, yes, I'd like to assist you, but that's going to be immediately $25 up front and $15 for every minute, right? See?
So
See?
let's use that as a little entrance ramp for Elburz here, because we've been talking.
Oh yeah,
about
can I chime in real quick on that last one? I just had an interesting point, because I always think you know, there's a big problem, I would say, just generally in society, which is that we kind of forget that history happened, and that like most of the stuff we're experiencing, like you just like turn around like 5 minutes ago and it's like, oh, that's exactly what is happening now. Just change the topic around. So I always try to, you know, I throw back a lot to music histories, because that's where I came from. And you know, like a big inspiration of mine was Glenn Gould when I was back in classical music, and he was one of the big pioneers of recording technology.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, like, he had these dreams of, you know, people could be the artists just by simply controlling the equalizer or the levels on stems. Like, that would make you an artist as a listener.
You mean like every superstar DJ in the world right now?
Yeah, well, I don't think he foresaw that level of artistry, but you know, it was this idea that for him, recording technology was this beautiful new thing that would, and very similar, like, you know how you're talking about Web3. There's somebody who had the vision of like, what is this going to be when it's working and ready and not polluted with kind of corporate interest, and when the people can get onboarded. You have the vision of like, this is going to be great. And then there's going to be all the people who are like, oh, recording technology is going to destroy live performance. Like, why would we want to record a performance? Like, then there's no real life bloodlust of the arena, you know? And so there's like an example there. You go again back to this idea of, and before, I think that really democratized people getting access to music. I mean, there are big generations of people who could not afford to go to the symphony now can listen to the symphony for free, the best symphonies in the world. And it's an amazing thing.
But the vast majority of them choose not to do that. They listen to BTS and chiptunes.
Well, I mean, that's fine. And so even going forward, I was going to say then the next, you know, big version of that was the digitalization and kind of streaming of music, right? Which I think is more in line with kind of what's happening today. You know, if we're thinking about visual arts or content making, you know, in air quotes, is this idea of, and I think this touches on AI, especially, like, what happens when everybody can make visual art?
Yeah.
You know, because when everyone became a bedroom Ableton producer with Fruity Loops and Ableton, and everyone could get their song on Beatport and Spotify, and all the songs were available everywhere, anytime. I know there was a lot of people who were worried about that situation. And it did take a long time for that. And there was a bumpy road going up and down, and big lawsuit against big lawsuit. And finally, it seems like artists have figured out, okay, this is how I do the streaming thing. This is how I make the career out of it. This live shows are kind of where money's at. Merch is where money's at, you know, and it's kind of become a little bit of a solved problem in some aspects, like maybe not perfect in every situation, but it's a little bit solved. Whereas I think it's a good example. We're doing the exact same thing again, but with visual mediums and AI generated art and AI generated text. Because I think to Bob's point, it's not AGI. Like, it's not AGI yet. We still got a little bit of ways before we get to AGI. But this democratization of like, oh, you mean somebody can go to ChatGPT and write a novel and they're not a writer? What does that mean for the economy of writers. I think from a society and cultural perspective, it's an amazing thing. Like Glenn Gould always talked about the idea that, you know, in the 1600s, everybody played music. Everyone had a family band. You know, when you went to church or a concert, everybody had a greater understanding and appreciation for what they're seeing because they also would go home and like play music and understand music. And I think that is what's really been cool about me watching the music industry grow, and everybody can make music now. I think in some aspects, if you take the extremes of it, then all of a sudden you get some kind of more cookie cutter genres of music maybe. And even myself, I think there's still things you can take away from that and learn from that and enjoy from that. Kind of like, you know, it's very concentrated, like high fructose, sucrose type of music, which is fun in some ways, but it also helps everyone just appreciate all the, there's weirder music now, I think, than there might have been previously, because I think more people generally understand a little bit more music because they can make a little bit of music. So I think that same trend is going to happen both with the visual side of things, with these new content creation pipelines, what decentralization means. But I think it always helps for folks just to, you know, like turn around and look 5 minutes into the past. And there's a lot of learning that exists there and a lot of progress in different areas that we can kind of take away and I think in some cases have hope for, because I think, you know, if you talk to anybody during the early days of music streaming and P2P stuff, it was not very hopeful. They're like, well, the music industry is ruined. Like, we can never be artists again. Like, that's it. We're not, if you're a musician, you're never making money again, which is completely untrue. And I think there's a lot of that kind of same dire grimness for content creators and visual artists, where they're thinking, oh, well, AI exists now, and this Web3 thing, and how do I monetize? Well, I guess visual artists are never making money again.
Well, yeah, but that's a good point, Elburz, right? Are those people sitting there thinking that they're not going to make money, they're not going to make a living out of it, they're not going to be able to do that? Are they sitting there thinking that because some accountant and some corporate executive and some publishing company has told them that they're not going to? Or do they really know that they're not going to? Because people who are inventive find a lot of different ways to make money. Look how many people have side hustles that are based on, like, you know, internet, AI, YouTube, you know, information exchange, information data provision, right? If you make something and you provide it to somebody, as long as it's of value to them, you'll get some money back for it, right? That's just a fact, right? If it's crap and it's no good and nobody wants it, you're not going to make anything. If it's brilliant and it's really good and people are really interested in it, it's going to make money, right? But I think that a lot of these people are being held back and pushed back because a lot of these corporations and companies and organizers have previously created that whole environment to make the money trickle down to them when they said so and got the small percentage they were supposed to, because they can't figure it out, right? Because it's too widespread. And there's just so many different things all the time, all at once, right? So many things, right? You can't narrow the funnel and focus it and monetize it. So I think that the creators will suddenly break free of those shackles and go, hey, wait a minute, right? Why is some dusty 65-year-old sitting in a corner office in New York telling me what I can and cannot do with my life, right? There are people out here who are mavericks, who are enablers, who are, you know, we're assistive. We want to see it progress. We want to see it go forward. We will come for those people. We will find a way to help them get to a point where they make money and they do well. And that's just a fact, right? That's what we do, right? Bob, you're exactly the same. I know you do a lot of like contract work, side work, stuff work, but you're just generating money to put money back into the business that actually is there to create and be creative and find other ways to make money off that money to pay other people to make more creative stuff. Your generator, your business, your whole raison d'etre is to create items, information, product, just to be creative, right? Just to be creative. You know, you need to get money to do that and to help other people do that, but that's what you really do, right? You're not in it to make money,
I don't know
right?
how to make money. I know how to make things that my brain makes me want to make.
Right.
And as long as I'm really focused on making the stuff that I am a good channel for, the money just follows. Ellen, I saw you you were vibrating there. Did you have thoughts?
Well, I just wanted, you know, that line keeps popping in my head about video killed the radio star, and then isn't it always sort of like fear of the, right, fear of the unknown and fear of the disruptive technology and, you know, what's next. And, you know, there'll be no records because there's Spotify or there was what the first one was, Napster. And, you know, then these things kind of come and go and the artists are still there and the creativity is still there. And they do find a way to monetize their lives if they're good at creating the content. It's like a freelance writer maybe put out of business seriously by chat GPT, because the guy that's writing the media kit can just go grab the information someplace else. It's out there.
My take on that one is the middle ground is going to get kind of eroded in creative spaces, because I think the high end of folks will use the tools and basically, quintillionize their output.
Right.
And the beginners and the lower end of the kind of talent pool that's just getting started is also going to be excited to use those tools, which will fast track them up the ladder towards the higher end. But it'll be the folks that a lot of the times, for any reason or another, get stuck in the middle of the pack. I think those folks are the ones that will, really just have to kind of take it on themselves to kind of learn those skills and push themselves into a position where they're not going to kind of...
Or not, Elburz, right? You're talking about people who work in the writer's room, right? The people who drive in the morning, get there at 9 o'clock, check in, sit around a big set of tables, do a load of writing, talk to a bunch of other people, write some stuff up. Then at 5 o'clock, they close the machine, get in the car, go home and go do something else, right? They're the jobbing writers, the writers in the writer's room. Okay, so yeah, they served a purpose because they lent manpower and intelligence and ability to shape things that came from original creatives or experimental stuff that need to be filtered. However, automation takes place all the time, has done since like the 1300s, right? We've never stopped automation, right? And automation, what it does is it removes repetitive functional tasks that are done over and over again, because humans are not designed to do that, right? So I think that you're absolutely right. We always live in a meritocracy. The people who are at the top who are super, super talented have other opportunities to expand their vision and deliver their vision that they didn't have before. The people at the bottom will fight their way up and use the tools. And then the ones in the middle who want to fight for it, they have to change the way that they do business, because you can't just sit there and complain and use strikes and strike action and work with everybody else to stop everything because you want to keep your cushy job and commute in the morning and commute in the evening and just do it, right? It's the meritocracy, which brings us back to the creative part of it, which brings us back to the power is coming back to the creators, not the enablers, not the facilitators, not the transformers, not the people who are moving it in different ways, the actual creators, right? And that's where it comes right back down to it. And that's what makes me happy about it. And that's what I think the creative people that we talk to and we know all see a bright future, not a dead one, right? Because I don't see a dead future. Do any of you?
No. And can we shift this conversation a little bit from like the monetization to like the Bob Boniol? Like Bob just created incredible content with AI for Billy Joel and Blake Shelton. What does that mean exactly? And what tools did you use? And how are you and Elburz going to teach people to use them?
Well, that's a great tool, because I think a lot of the keeping people from getting stuck in the middle and a lot of the getting the people to be able to enter from the bottom and rise quickly is about teaching the tools. And, I mean, with Blake and with Billy, the fascinating thing about both those shows is that the state of the art of this technology is moving so fast that even in just the, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks I worked on each of those shows, my tools and what I was using to make content and their capacity and capability and feature set shifted like beyond tangibly, like radically, while I was working on those shows. We started, for instance, making content for Billy Joel's Allentown, a seminal tune, about blue collar workers, right, trying to rise to the top of the stack. When we started with that, we were making video for that song using a specific tool set, which uses an AI generative app called Stable Diffusion. And we were using a specific tool for Stable Diffusion called Deforum, which and you should go check those things out if you don't know anything about them. Go check them out, Google them, go look at YouTube videos of people using this stuff, and you can get a sense for how really easily you can be using it quickly. But when we were using Deforum in November to create Allentown for Billy for the beginning of the stadium tour, which was going to happen in Australia, the output of that was so cool, but it was a little bit like stop motion animation, right? It was a little jittery, but by working hard to finesse what image was going to what image, it all felt really good. And we were pursuing a style that was more painterly. So with the constraints of the tech at the time, it came out really good. Now, flash forward to the end of December, a scant, like 4 weeks later, when we started to make the content for Blake Shelton, and we were working on the song Neon Lights, which is about a country bar, right? A neon-soaked country bar. And we worked with the same exact tools in that case to evoke that country bar, like lots of neon hat signs and dancing cowboy boots and pretty farm girls dancing. The level of the output from Stable Diffusion and Deform was so much more advanced. Like, it was smooth. It didn't look like stop motion animation. It looked like a piece of content that we had hired a content agency to animate using whatever tools, whether those are hand animation or Cinema 4D or whatever, right? It looked like something we had spent weeks producing, you know, and in fact, we had produced it much faster than that. And we're even able to iterate on it. Like, when we wanted to shift and change things, it became the facility to make those changes. The most powerful thing that AI gave us in that case, you know, wasn't necessarily a scale of economy. Like, it didn't get a lot cheaper to make that content, but we were able to cycle through versions so much faster and make the changes we wanted and have that look really refined that by, you know, a month later, when we put the show up in Lincoln, Nebraska, people's minds were blown by that, right? So, and, you know, to be clear, you know, just in that educational zone, we use Stable Diffusion for that. And I used it via a way to run that on my local computer, which is called Automatic 1111. So if you're a nerd for this stuff, check out Stable Diffusion, check out Automatic 1111, and check out Deform. This is how we made those animations, right? And then we combine that with the power of gaming engines. So in that case, we used, on both shows, we used Unreal Engine to then take a lot of these materials we were making and use it as art direction within scenes we set up in Unreal Engine. And again, the feature that made Unreal Engine so critical and beneficial in that was its ability to be real time, to iterate. Whereas before, I would make a lot of the things I was making in Unreal and Cinema 4D, and necessarily I would have to wait minutes, hours, sometimes days to see what had happened about the choices I was making. You know, me and Steve Cohen, who were the production designer for both those shows, we were able to, like, sit with our coffee in the morning, block out some camera moves, look at stuff, look at textures, look at the scene, figure out what we wanted. And by noon, we had that stuff up on the screen and we were looking at it in the arena in context. So what the tools have given us is just an ability to move so quickly and to refine so quickly that the outcome of both those shows was radically different than it would have been even 18 months ago. When instead of what I just described, I would have showed up at the technical rehearsals for that show with content on a hard drive, and my ability to change that in a meaningful way before an audience showed up would have been terribly prescribed, right? Now, you know, I like to say that what AI is allowing is a little bit of a return to the creative auteur, you know, to an individual who can have a vision, who doesn't necessarily then need the support of a giant team to quickly get to a version of that vision and begin to iterate on it. So, and Elburz, you're kind of teaching a lot of this.
Yeah, and actually what I was going to ask you is, I think this is one of the things that we teach a lot and try and impart a lot to our students is, I think what allows you to do that, because I think a lot of people would hear that story and say, oh, in 4 weeks, the tooling is completely changed and there's new workflows and we're doing this. That would terrify a lot of folks. And I think the reason that terrifies them is, and you know, maybe this is a problem with education, which, you know, I don't think we're still single-handedly going to solve this problem with education, but
we need a few more podcasts to do that.
We need a few more podcasts, but I think a lot of folks, when they are learning stuff, they are taught, I think this is, we've been talking for a while, so I don't even remember when I said this, but it was near the beginning where I said, oftentimes people are taught how to do ABC with XYZ. And they learned that, and that's the box that their kind of brain gets stuck in, is I know how to do ABC with XYZ. If ABC was to change, I'm screwed. If XYZ was to change, I'm also screwed. So there's a particular set of skills that folks learn on how to do a very specific thing. And something that I found has been one of the reasons why I was able to kind of have my very fortunate career, like doing projects and big artists, big tours, top Fortune 50 brands, all this kind of good stuff. And then transition into like doing a lot of this teaching. And, you know, our school does really well, and our students always really receive well the things that we teach them, is that I approach it from this aspect of what is the actual fundamental piece of knowledge that's required for me to be able to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P with X, Y, Z, or alternatively, how can I do ABC with every single tool set that's available on the market? Because I fundamentally understand what ABC is. You know, ABC is not some very strict paradigm of I set these parameters and buttons in the software to get it.
Right.
ABC is a workflow where this process happens behind the scene and this process happens behind the scene. And in whichever software or toolkit I wish to represent that, I just have to find what they call those particular sets of buttons or parameters or things like that. And I think that's like a really cool part of your story that you were just kind of talking about, is that folks will probably miss if they're not like really deep into like thinking about this kind of stuff, is you find that exciting. You find that a cool challenge, new opportunity, new possibilities, because I think you're approaching it with that mindset of, and it's very much like that auteur idea. You know what you want at a big picture, artistically and creatively. You know the kind of fundamental techniques that are going to be used, or the fundamental ideas or processes or workflows that are going to be explored. And then you let the tools kind of augment or give you pros and cons and variations of those different things that you can then play with, experiment with, and kind of build something unique and interesting with. And I think that's one of the ways that we try and explore a lot of the things that we're teaching, because I think the thing that folks don't talk about in our industry a lot is how much knowledge you need to actually be effective. Like, it's unlike a lot of other industries. Like, you could go into a web development gig. I know JavaScript. I know how to run some databases. You can make 150 plus a year just being a backend developer, knowing like 3 things pretty decently. I think it's really hard to come into this immersive media, interactive technology business and know 1 or 2 things. I mean, even recently, like, we launched this whole mini degree program that tries to give people like this big primer. And as we were going through it, we're like, oh my God, there's so many topics that, you know, media art history, UX, UI design, you know, what is fine art? We have a course, what is fine art? Because it touches on what we do, right? Like, what is art? What is the meaning of being creative? What is rendering engines, touch designer, Ableton, audio, music, like the list just go. And then and at that point, you still don't even know how to go plug in projectors, let alone set up you're just kind of like, it is a quarter of the pipeline, right? So I think that's like a really exciting part for a lot of people. I think it can be a daunting part for a lot of people, but it's something that our school is always trying to do in our core, is make sure that when folks are learning about topics, they're understanding these kind of fundamental, you know, nuggets and thought processes that can translate into so many other ways of them being able to solve problems, that ultimately lets them be successful. And like we were saying with Bob and Ian earlier, like, you know, you need money to be able to be creative. You know, if you can't pay your bills, it's always going to be tough. So having kind of a lot of abilities, a lot of understanding of how these business processes, like we even have a bunch of I have a class, let me tell you my favorite class I have, which it's not people's favorite class, it's my favorite class. Yeah. I open Google Docs, I have an SOW, an MSA, an NDA open, and I read through them line by line, explaining what every single line means in normal English. And
oh my God,
most people's eyes glaze over.
How often I've been asked for that
right?
kind of class, like an understanding of the basics of business, of the creative industry. What a valuable thing to be doing.
So, and for me, it's my favorite class because I love legalese. Legalese is like playing a jigsaw puzzle with words, because they're just trying to say real simple things in like the most legally sensitive way possible. But again, it's part of the industry. And I think if folks are accepting of that challenge oh my God, what an unbelievable industry that is still just starting. Like, I think going back to this educational point, I think, Alan, we were talking about this before. I don't know of any other industry in the world, maybe music is a close one, the only other one applicable, where most of this generation's talents never had schooling for the thing we're doing. Right? Like,
Right.
because there was no immersive design courses 10 years ago. So the current generation of talent, the current trendsetters, the auteurs of this generation's immersive media, Web3 stuff, none of these people went to school for this kind of stuff. Maybe we went for something related, which the closest relatable thing would have been either like theater production. Maybe you went to school for like VFX or something and then kind of transitioned. But nobody in our industry is really post-secondary trained. Like, everyone kind of just figured out how to do it themselves. And I think that's like a super fun thing that folks can think about when they're getting in this industry. This is the Wild West. Like, you can really be as creative as you want, do whatever you want, figure out your own way of doing it, and it's probably going to be perfectly accepted and even considered cool and like unique and interesting, and people will love to hear about it.
Yeah, you know what, Elburz, you've just hit on exactly the problem that, like, you know, the large system and systematic machine that exists was built up to do, because you're right? There isn't anywhere they can go where this is actually taught or educated, or it's just everybody is doing a whole new thing in a whole new way. But the tools and the technology, as Bob was talking about just now, right? The tools and the technology are evolving so fast and so well and are so good, right? That the barrier to entry is not your ability to transform your talent into another media. That'll be done for you. The barrier to entry is, do you have that talent, right? He has talent in abundance, right? You know, it's brilliant, but now he can bring that out and expose that a lot quicker, and he can show that a lot quicker, and he can prove that a lot quicker. It doesn't take a large group or a consensus or anything. You've got that ability to do it. But one of the things that we're doing is we're actually creating an educational platform that goes alongside the Web3 platform that is actually properly intended at traditional education systems. But the thing for me is, right, that, and this is the whole point, I can create an educational system that educates people to bring those people to have the skills to bring them into my educational system and improve my educational system, right? So if I want the workers of tomorrow for that full end-to-end educational experience and educational system, I have to teach them, train them, but I'm going to do it on the system that they're going to be using so that they are immediately ready to go, and it will evolve, right? Again, it's an evolution, it's self-learning, it's self-usage. But these tools and technologies, we need to make sure that they're not just a one-stop like guide rail to get you somewhere, that they're actually a functional device that you will continue to use for years and years throughout your career. And I think that's happening, right? You know, Bob's ability to use Stable Diffusion or 1111 or Blender or whatever it is, right? His ability to do that is because that tool set, he's grown with that tool set and he knows how to use those tools. He uses them in different ways. So he takes them with him into his future iteration. And those companies create new versions and improve the other versions in accordance with how they're used and what they're being used for, right? So we have a beautiful environment here that maybe doesn't really immediately come to your attention, that looks like, you know, experimental hobbyist radio ham situation or CB radio enthusiast, right? But it's not that. It's not that, right? It's everybody working together in harmony and in combination to move the goalpost forward all together. We're all, every time everyone has a bit of success, we all congratulate each other and pat each other on the back and try and support it, because we're moving the paradigm forward together. And I think that is a beautiful thing, right? I got to do that in the video game industry when we went from 16-bit to 32-bit. I got to do that in the gaming and entertaining industry, the gambling industry, because we were making slot machines that were no longer slot machines with physical reels. They were actual video games with entertainment stuff, right? I've got to do it again and again throughout my career. And this one now feels bigger and better and stronger, and there's more opportunity than all the others put together. Well, you're absolutely on the money, man. You were absolutely spot on, right? Nobody's done it before. And that's the really exciting bit. Every time you open a gate, it's a brand new field of untouched snow, right? That's amazing. How many times have you afforded that in your life?
Amazing. So we are running out of time, and I love that because Ian, man, you just did a mic drop of a finishing thought there. Ellen, do you have a finishing thought here before we go?
Yeah, I just want to say that by the time the first people get their PhD in AI, we'll be on to something new.
Oh my gosh, you ain't kidding. Elburz, we clearly need to have you back, because I feel like we have just scratched some of the deep surface below that big throbbing brain.
It was like I said at the beginning, you know, folks in our school know if you get me talking, I will not stop talking. It's probably my favorite thing. But I would say, you know, for folks to check out our school, the Interactive and Immersive HQ, it's a really wonderful place. And even more than that, I think it is a wonderful time to be a creator. I think the amount of tools, the access to knowledge, both free and paid kind of trainings, are unbelievable in such a vast quantity that you really can make creative dreams come true. Like, it sounds so corny, but it is true. Like, and you know, Ellen, we were talking about this the other day when we were talking about how do we get folks from different communities involved in this kind of new immersive media interactive design industry. It's really just let them know, like, those things that you dream that you can do, and the tours you want to be a part of, and the artists that you love, and the experiences and brands that you value, they need you to basically learn some of these tools, because there's more jobs than people that can do the jobs. So, you know, my final thought could be another hour-long diatribe about all kinds of topics, but I'll leave it there. You know, there's more jobs than people that can do them. So if this is at all interesting stuff to you, like, definitely start learning it, because it is so much fun. It goes in a million different ways, and kind of it's only growing and growing.
So
So
can we train,
we're gonna have those links in the comments below. Ellen, what were you
right?
saying?
I was going to say, can we train those high school kids to like want to do this?
Oh my God,
They
they're
don't
probably
wanna
easier to
do it.
train, because you don't have to untrain them
to.
from the other things. Like, half the time I got to untrain people from the things
Yeah.
they're
Right.
doing.
Yeah.
But they've already
Yeah.
learned on Ian's PlayStation how to get the basic tools, so they're ready to go, right?
Yeah, they already know there is no spoon. Like, for other folks, I gotta unspoon a little bit. But no, they're already like, oh, I can do anything with technology. Like, you don't need to tell me. Like, I already know that.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what,
Well-
Elburz, listen, you are in my top 3 interactive creator trombonists in the world who I know.
Wait, who are the two others? Who are the two others?
Listen, you keep working, you will be number 1, my friend. You will get
Oh my God, I wasn't
okay.
number one? Oh, come on,
Just
bro.
do it.
Tough
Just do
crowd,
it.
tough crowd,
Just
tough
keep
crowd.
going, man. Keep going.
I'll send my audition tape. Don't worry, direct.
It's a good thing you don't play the saxophone, because he's English. He'd be calling you a saxophonist.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, on that note, we're going to leave you. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Zone 1, the intersection of culture and technology. Elburz, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Definitely going to have you back, because I have
Anytime.
there's a lot more talking to do, and as you can tell, we love to talk here. Come back. We'll be back soon, and in the meantime, have fun and watch out for Skynet. Thanks for tuning in.